We'll review the supply and demand model they learned in the Principles of Microeconomics course. We'll begin by thinking about individual demand. Every individual is going to have a demand curve for a given good. This demand curve will indicate how many units of a good each individual wants to buy at a given price. Now there's an alternative interpretation which indicates how much this person values each unit of a good. And we refer to the quantity of goods that someone is willing to buy at a given price as the quantity demanded by that individual. To construct market demand, we need to recognize that markets are the result of interactions of many different individuals, both as consumers and as sellers. And therefore, the market demand curve is going to reflect the demand of each individual in the market. To construct the market demand curve, we will sum up the quantity demanded by each of these individual demand curves for a given price. Here we have two individuals, Tina and Scott, with their own individual demand schedules for water. We can construct market demand by observing that at each price we know Tina and Scott's quantity demanded, and we can add those together to produce a market demand quantity. For example, at $4, Tina has a quantity demanded of 3, and Scott has a quantity demanded of 2. And so the market quantity demanded will be 5, because that is 3 plus 2. Important concern with market demand curves is how they shift or get moved around as in response to external shocks. A couple of major external shocks, what we call demand shifters, include things like tastes and preferences. What's in style, what's in fashion, what do people prefer now versus at other points in time. Income is another important demand shifter, and we will revisit it when we discuss the income elasticity of demand. In general, we think of an increase in income as increasing the demand for most goods, what we call normal goods, and decreasing demand for a small subset of goods that we call inferior goods. We also worry about the prices of related goods because goods can be complements, things that go together, or substitutes, things where you would use one or the other, but not both of a pair of goods. Expectations for the future also matter, and you can think about this as how do people behave when they expect prices to change in the future, either because of external shocks like tariffs, or because of incoming events like hurricanes and snowstorms. Lastly, the number of buyers has a mechanical effect on the location of the market demand curve because market demand is the sum of those individual demand curves. The flip side of market demand is the idea of market supply. And most markets are going to be served by many firms, although throughout the course we will see examples where markets are served by many fewer firms. The market supply curve is going to be the sum of these individual supply curves, where the individual supply curves reflect the marginal cost for each firm to produce a given good. So again, much like in the case of market demand, where we add up quantities demanded, for market supply, we will add up quantity supplied at each price to go from individual supply curves, an example here of pizza, to a market supply curve of pizza. Supply curves can also be affected by what we call supply shifters or determinants of supply. Prominent ones include changes in technology or productivity, as I learn new ways of doing things that will affect where the supply curve is located. The price of inputs also affects the location of the supply curve. As inputs become more expensive, the supply curve will shift up. As inputs become cheaper, the supply curve will shift down. Expectations for the future can also determine the supply curve because if I expect, for example, the price of a good to go up in the future, I might store it now to sell it in the future. The prices of related goods also affect supply in much the same way as it does demand, where you can have complements or substitutes in production that affect the prices of other goods. Lastly, the number of sellers has a mechanical relationship with the market supply curve, since market supply is a sum of individual level supply curves. Now that we've talked about supply and demand, we can discuss markets. A market is anything that's going to bring sellers, suppliers, and buyers or demanders together. In these markets, we're going to determine the prices for goods and services based on the idea that markets are going to clear when the quantities demanded and supplied of a good or service are equal. And we'll just try and find the price that makes that happen. We call that process finding an equilibrium, as that is the point where the market clears. And when a market is in equilibrium, there's no pressure for prices to change, either up or down. And that reflects a process by which markets find an equilibrium. Markets find this equilibrium using an auction-like process. We'll guess a price, and if the price is too low, there might be excess demand, and consumers who are not served at that price will offer to buy the good at a higher price, which increases the price at which this good is actually sold. If the price is too high, then there will be excess supply, and sellers will have unsold inventory that they might unload by reducing prices. It's only when we're in an equilibrium, where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied, that there's no unsold inventory, and all consumers who wish to purchase a good have received that good, that we end up in a point where prices do not change.